Well, hey, this is Chase, and in this video on YouTube, I'm going to share my recent experience of going to Moab, Utah here in June of 2016. And this is a result of a class in our church that I took along with my wife. And the name of the class is God's Word, God's World. And so this is a review of my learning in this class, which I've taken actually 3 times, beginning in 2011 and ending up the 3rd time this year in 2016. Now, I want to recognize right off the bat, there are 2 solid ways that people believe. Maybe they're called stories or scientific reasons, whatever you want to say. But people have 2 distinct ways of believing the age of the earth and things that happen. So the earth is either 4.5 billion years old, or some believe that it's 6,000 years old. Now, just right off the bat, that's a difference in magnitude of age of about 1 million. Slightly less if you really want to be technical, but it's about a 1 million degree difference or order in magnitude between 4.5 billion years and 6,000 years old. And what that means to me is, and in our study, we saw huge scales. So it's not it shouldn't be close, because 4.5 billion years is not close, not even remotely close to 6,000. We're talking almost light years difference. It's huge. Okay, so in our learning process, it was encouraged that we should see things that should be very clear, distinct. It shouldn't be, oh, it could have been this way, it could have been that way. I think the difference is huge in magnitude. So that's just what I want to make a point of in this slide. So I want to go to the Bible because I definitely believe in the Bible, and but I will tell you that my foundation was not as strong as it is now. And in John chapter 3, verse 12, Jesus is speaking to Nicodemus, a Pharisee, and he says in this quote, or in this phrase, that if I have told you earthly things and you do not believe, how can you believe if I tell you heavenly things? And the point was, he wanted Nicodemus to know that there are things that were written in the Torah and in the Bible that were earthly things, and there are also things that are heavenly things. So Jesus wanted him to know that, you have to, if I'm going to tell you things, you have to believe them, the earthly things, so that you also can know that I'm telling you the truth about heavenly things. And 4 verses later, most Christians know John 3:16. It's one of the most famous, remembered verses in the Bible. So Jesus is speaking again and saying, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life." Now, it doesn't say that you have to understand Genesis and understand the flood of Noah and understand layers in geology in Arizona or Utah. But it does say that, whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life. And if you believe in him, that would probably indicate you should know as much as you possibly can and look for everything that Jesus talks about. So the earthly things as well. So now let's get into the study. These are 2 different signs that I took in the visitor centers in Canyonlands National Park. And what they show is the same layers in different signs in the same order, and describing, what you will see in the park. Okay, and what the thing is it's the same layers in order. They're always in order. They're also the relatively same color and the same height, and they're stacked upon each other in the same order. All that, and we're talking not just in a tiny little park in Utah, but over vast areas including Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, Nevada. So remember those order of magnitude. These are huge layers, huge. And so whatever formed them had to do a big task. Okay, it's order of magnitude of trillions of cubic miles of dirt or layers or formations or material, okay? And they're always in the same layers, in the same order, which is pretty astonishing. It wasn't irregular. It wasn't something here happened here in Utah, something else different in Arizona. I mean, those are vastly different. It's very arid, but it's a vast difference in amount of size of area. Okay, it's huge, is what I'm trying to say. So, here we are in Canyonlands National Park. This is the grand overview, looking at Canyonlands away, and down there somewhere is the Colorado River. But what this shows is I'm standing on a level surface about like the same elevation to the plateau that you see on the right. Same elevation, you can look straight across. But then it drops off this cliff and then goes across and then drops off into these canyons. Now, what caused the canyons? Well, everyone agrees it's water. And there's no doubt about that. Even if you believe that the Earth is billions of years old, you look at this and say, yeah, absolutely, water. A little bit of water over a long period of time, millions and millions and millions of years. Well, the thing is, there's none. There's zero evidence. And when I talk about orders of magnitude of 1 million, we don't see any water here. We don't see a lake. We don't see little streams leading to the arm of the canyon that began cutting in away. We see nothing. So the order of magnitude, and remember I said it's going to be really clear. Well, this is really clear to me. We got this, plateau on the right, on the far right, and then boom, bam. It cuts down, and all of a sudden, and then it goes across in the middle of the picture, boom. Another severe canyon, boom, just cut, dropped. Just like a knife cut straight down, and then went on, and then you see it even further off in the distance. You see deeper canyons, just whoop, cut, boom, right away, just cut. And so significant erosion. We're talking cubic miles of debris and dirt and material moved, cut out, okay, gone. But zero sign of any water doing it. Now you're going to say, well, yeah, the Colorado River did it. How did the river cut these little arms? How did that happen? You don't see that in real life today. And plus the river is way down, and you can't say, well, it meandered back and forth. Do you see this little arm closest in the center? What? No, that just doesn't make sense. And it left little peaks and little standing areas left. That just seemed odd. Why wouldn't it clear at all? Because it's meandering back and forth. Why did it leave some standing spires and plateaus and stuff like that? See, it begins to be, it makes you think. You go, wait a second, that's interesting. That doesn't make sense. We don't see that today. We don't see rivers cutting little arms like this. And speaking of rivers, do you know what the largest river is in America? It's not the Colorado River. It's the Mississippi. Okay? The Colorado is a huge river, no doubt. But think about this. The Mississippi River, the drainage from that is enormous. It's probably over like a quarter of or even half of the country, starting at Minnesota. Have you ever seen a canyon in the Mississippi? Remember, it's a huge river, cutting out all this debris and cutting. Where's the canyon of the Mississippi? Remember, it's a lot of water, right? Well, there is no canyon of the Mississippi. It's just moving debris, but it's not cutting out huge canyons. So think about the largest river in the United States, the Mississippi. It has zero canyons, none. Zip, nothing. It's not doing much. Now, what happened here is the Colorado did not cut it. Okay, I don't believe that. Because again, how did these little arms and these little standing plateaus, and how did it get up so high? We're at 6,000 feet. Okay? So, and it wasn't meandering back and forth because it left standing plateaus. And if you look, the sides of the canyon to the far right on that plateau, and in the canyons in the middle and way off in the distance, they all are cut. Like the sides of the canyons are cut, and they're pretty straight. Not perfectly straight, but the bottom of the canyon is supposed to be like 50 million or 100 million years older, yet it looks like the top of the canyon in the top right. The order of magnitude is not a million. They look the same. The sides of the canyons look the same. In other words, wouldn't the erosion on the bottom of the canyon way down, those sides of the canyons would be much more eroded and they'd look different by a factor of a million because they're millions of years, supposedly millions of years older, but they don't. They look like they're about the same age. Like they were cut really within like a week or a month or a couple months of time. Okay? If you look at it, the sides of the canyons, they do look similar. All the way down to supposedly the oldest part of the canyon is at the bottom. Okay? And so the tops and the youngest would be at the bottom, the oldest would be the top. The top canyons and the top sides of the walls look like the bottom. It's not a big difference. They look the same. And again, where's the water? Behind me to the right is another canyon just like this. It starts off gradual and then boom, canyons. No water. There's no reservoir. There's no little stream that's cutting out. The Colorado didn't cut this. How would the Colorado cut a little arm and leave these standing spires? Think about it. Really? You're telling me that the Colorado River did this? And the tops of everything, the canyon walls look all the same. And supposedly this is over a couple 100 million years of time and everything looks the same. And it left these standing spires. These are questions that I had. And when you look at the Bible and realize there was a global flood, and so let's talk about that for a moment. That's where the water came. So you look at chapter 6 of Genesis. The flood, the amount of water covered the mountains. Now, we didn't have Mount Everest then, didn't have the Rockies then. The earth was pretty, there were mountains, but it was a lot lower, probably no more than 2,000 feet is an estimate. Nothing like 28,000 feet of the Mount Everest, nothing like that. So during the flood, the earth was covered in water. And all the mountaintops were covered. So the flood took a year, just over a year, I think 13 months. And so it covered the whole earth. So that's where the water came from. So if I look at this and see these deep cut canyons, I would say, looks like a lot of water forced and found a weakness and began running down the sides, or running across it first. But remember the top plateau to the far right. That's where the water started cutting. Then it went down and found another weakness and boom, cut down and just began eroding like in minutes, definitely days or weeks, probably not more than a week to create the entire Canyonlands National Park and everything in it. And so when I look at the global flood of Noah and in the Bible in Genesis, when it covered the earth, that's where the water came from. Came from the fountains of the deep, and it rained for 40 days and 40 nights. Now, we'll cover, some of you may have that question. I can answer that, but not in this video. So that's where the water came from, because there's no water storage, there's no lake, there's no reservoir, there's no stream here. It's really dry here in Utah, okay? And so there is no explanation for where the water came from. If you think or believe that this is the process of creating these canyons was millions of years, there's not enough water. It just doesn't happen. And little drops of water don't cut like that. They make things rounded and smooth too. This is more of a catastrophic effect, like you see in tsunamis and hurricanes. Water does the same thing then. And, canyons are formed like in Mount St. Helens, and then it erupts again and blasts. There's a dam break, and the water cut through, and it looks just like this. And that happened in 1980. If you look at the canyons of Mount St. Helens, you look at the Grand Canyon, you're like, God, they look the same, because the same process created them, a catastrophic water event, a flood. Mount St. Helens was a very local flood, though, not a global. So the answer for me in this picture is, how do these form? How do these canyons form? We're looking at about 1,000 feet of water above us. And the first 5 months of the flood, water is accumulating and covering up the earth all the way to the tops of the mountains. Okay? In the next, months 6 through 12, 13, the water is receding in big ways. Sheets of water falling off the continents, ripping and tearing, and movements and uplifts and continents crashing together. There's a lot going on here that's causing water to run around like crazy. And the water created all the layers in the first 5 months. Okay, so if I back up, these layers were created in the first 5 months of the flood, because the waters are rising and getting higher and higher, and the earth is going under tremendous continental movement, and that things are happening there, and water is just, it's creating a mess, and it's tearing down things and creating layers like what we see here. And then the water would shift and create a different layer because it's tearing apart. And we're talking on continental scale here, not just a little localized stuff, but continental scale, ripping across and creating layers that are all about the same thickness. And then all of a sudden, boom, it shifts, and then there's a new material, and it creates a different layer. And that's why you don't see any erosion between layers or in the layer. Look at Wingate sandstone to the right, the big red one. All around the parks that you see in the National Park System in the Southwest, the Wingate sandstone is about that thickness. It's, what does it say? It's 91 to 152 meters high. Okay, there's a little variance there, but it's pretty uniform across vast scale of, several states in the Southwest. And so you don't see any erosion, you don't see any river gouges or any cuts or any erosion inside it, because it was all created underwater, like sandstone is created, okay, with water. And boom, one layer, and then things shift, another layer, and then boom, boom, boom. 5 months to create thousands of feet of layers. 5 months. And then the water starts receding in months 6 through 13, in the last half year. And all that water was covering the earth, and it was leaving quickly, and mountains were being pushed up, and that, you push up a mountain, and all of a sudden water rushes away from the mountain. That's the other thing. Valleys and all point towards mountains. That's an interesting thing. Think about it. Why do valleys always point towards mountains? Because the water was rushing away from the mountain. That's why valleys always point to mountains. Another interesting thing. So in this case, there's no water to be found here and now. There never was there. It was all from a global flood. This picture, to me, says it all, because there's no evidence that millions of years of water drainage caused this. There's a river at the bottom, the Colorado, but it didn't meander and leave spires standing and create this arm right in the very front center. That just doesn't make sense. It came and turned and didn't leave, and it left those other spires. No, it was 1,000 or a couple thousand feet of water above us. We would be in water if we took the picture from that position in the flood. It started carving sand and material from the plateau to the right, and then kind of moved away. It didn't find any it didn't find any soft spots, and then boom, it found a soft spot, and boom, it just started ripping and tearing. And water does that. You want to clean something, what do? Spray harder with water, and it begins cutting. You know this. Well, that's what happened. All this water was rushing, and it would find a weak spot, and it would start eating away, and then boom. Ever see a dam break? It just does the same thing. And then off in the distance, you can see lower canyons. It just kept finding weak spots. And as it was draining off, it would find weak spots. So it began in the top right of that plateau, and then water was draining down, so it left that plateau. So the water level receded down because it's draining off the continents. Then it found a weak spot, and it drained and cut through more, and then it kept going lower and lower. And thus, all the layers are formed and level and equal, and there's no variation, not much variation. And then it was cut when the water was receding. That explains these layers pretty well. Millions of years? What do you mean? There is no erosion while the Wingate sandstone was being created? It doesn't make sense. Tens of millions of years and nothing, no erosion? To me, that just seems crazy. So, for me, this picture says a lot. And this next one is my wife. You can see these plateaus and the spire in the center left, and then a plateau in the distance, and then way back in the distance. Those are all about the same height. And so water, a huge amount of water above us, maybe a couple thousand feet, was rolling down and finding weak spots and ripping through and tearing out thousands of cubic miles of debris and material and layered sandstone and cutting it through like a knife. Why? Because it was all wet. These layers were still wet. They were underwater for 5 months. Didn't take much to cut through them because they were pretty darn wet. But water can cut through, as in the Mount St. Helens disaster, it can cut through basalt like nothing. Enough moving water and enough force, it'll cut through solid granite rock, one of the hardest things, just like butter. And so what this told me is, in the orders of magnitude, I mean, we're talking of the same height, way across, the same formations, the same layers, and then boom, it's all gone, and the sides of the walls and everything looked the same. The bottom of the canyons, the sides of the walls looked like the tops of the canyon sides of the walls. It doesn't look like millions of years difference on the top, because it's the oldest, right? And the bottom was the newest. They looked the same. So these are some things that really spoke to me as I was there, and I've studied and read Genesis a lot, not only just the chapters 6 through 8, but everything else too, because that's the foundation of our faith. And so I just encourage those of you watching to really think about this. And the main point is, where did the water come from? Okay, how did it literally cut vast canyons and leave some standing spires and this and that, and the tops of the canyon look like the bottom, not like millions of years difference. Okay, and these canyons are all over the southwest U.S. and in the same order and the same approximate thickness and the same colors and all that stuff, yet we see vastly different things. And Arizona and Utah and New Mexico and all these places, they're so dry, they preserve what it looked like, I believe, what it looked like when the flood subsided and Noah walked out of the ark. Vastly different world. And of course, we even have things like I mentioned, the Colorado River and the Mississippi River, and any big river doesn't cut big canyons anymore. It's just moving silt, really, is all it's doing. Because we don't have a Mississippi River canyon at all. It's just it's a big river, but it hasn't cut through anything. So are we to believe that, oh yeah, the Colorado River, it cut, and moved trillions of cubic miles of dirt and created these fancy canyons with arms that, really irregularly shaped and left some standing spires. It just doesn't begin. It's just on the order of magnitude that just like, I've never seen anything like that. Rivers don't do that. So that makes me believe that this was the event of a cataclysmic flood, the flood of Noah. And so Trish and I really enjoyed our trip to Moab, and our faith is even stronger, and we believe those heavenly things because we believe the earthly things as well. And God said what he did to create the world, and he created this flood because things were kind of bad in his mind, and things were really evil, and he did what he would. It was the loving thing, because it was just an evil world then, and he took 8 people and said, gather up the animals and get in this ark, build it, and there's going to be a flood, and that's an earthly thing. And the cool thing is there's also heavenly things. So I hope you understand verse 3:12 of John. I hope you understand John 3:16, because they're both true. This is Chase Swift. Have a great day. Bye for now.